Welcome, curious minds. Have you ever felt just utterly overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information out there?
Oh, definitely.
Wishing for some kind of shortcut to really understanding what matters most. Or maybe you're seeking to connect with, the deeper currents of human experience.
Those things that get lost in the daily grind.
Exactly. Those timeless truths often buried beneath the churn of life. Well, today we're embarking on a truly remarkable deep dive.
Yes, we are.
Into a collection that promises just that. The Rag and Bone Shop of the Heart. An anthology curated by the insightful Robert Bly.
A fantastic collection.
And this isn't just like a book of poems you'd skim through.
No, not at all.
It's really a treasure chest of distilled insights into the very essence of the human spirit. A place where profound truths are unearthed from the raw, fragmented stuff of life itself.
Yeah, the rag and bone bits, as the title suggests. And our mission for you today is precisely that. To pull out some of the most vital nuggets of wisdom from this, extraordinary collection.
Vital nuggets. I like that.
We'll explore how poetry, an art form sometimes dismissed or kind of pushed to the side in our fast-paced modern culture.
Right, seen as academic or difficult.
Exactly. But how it can actually offer truly essential lessons for navigating our complex emotions, for improving our relationships, expressing ourselves more fully, more authentically.
And even finding joy.
And ultimately finding a deeper, more grounded sense of joy in the everyday.
Absolutely. It's about understanding these deep currents running through all human experience and, crucially, learning how to implement them in your own life.
Okay, so practical wisdom, not just theory.
That's the goal. We're looking for those aha moments, the ones that transform mere knowledge into genuine, applicable wisdom that you can actually carry forward. So think of this as a journey, a deep dive into the soul of human experience, with the timeless power of words as our guide. We'll explore these powerful themes like embracing our authentic selves, navigating the often complex dynamics of family,
Always tricky.
finding and truly using our unique voice, facing uncomfortable truths head-on.
Which we often avoid.
We do. And perhaps most profoundly, learning to love the world, even with all its imperfections and challenges. It's a journey that promises not just information, but hopefully transformation.
Definitely. So where should we start? Maybe with the power of language itself.
Yep.
Poetry.
Yeah, let's start there. The transformative power of poetic language.
Okay, so let's unpack this right at the top. Robert Bly, in the anthology, he highlights what he calls a profound defect in Western culture.
A defect. Strong word.
It is our poetic underdevelopment. And this isn't just a casual observation, it's a deep cultural critique. He draws this really sharp contrast with other cultures.
Like which ones?
Well, Spanish-speaking cultures, Russian, Arabic, or the many, many tongues of Africa and the Indian subcontinent. In these places, he observes people kind of grow up inside poems.
Inside poems. What does that mean exactly?
It means they're drenched through with poetic metaphors and rhythms from a young age. They learn to listen and to recite poetry as an integral part of their being, often, before they even learn to read.
Wow, okay, so it's absorbed, not just studied.
Precisely. And this difference, Bly suggests, isn't trivial. It points to a significant cultural loss in the West. A loss of what he calls fanciful delicacy and powerful truths.
Fanciful delicacy and powerful truths. So what's the consequence of losing that, if we're poetically underdeveloped?
Well, the consequence, he argues, is that our emotions and imagination can flatten out. They become less vibrant, less nuanced.
Flattened emotions.
Yeah, and perhaps most significantly, there's even a loss of heart to take up the great cultural challenges that are part of every man's citizenship.
A loss of heart. That's huge.
It really is. In this sense, poetry isn't just an academic subject or, a leisure activity. It's presented as a kind of therapy of the culture at its psychic roots.
Therapy for the culture.
A fundamental healing process for a society that has, in some ways, forgotten how to truly feel and imagine deeply. It's about restoring a vital connection to something primal, something essential within us.
That's a powerful idea. Therapy of the culture at its psychic roots. It makes me wonder, are there specific symptoms of this poetic underdevelopment that Bly points to in, everyday life? If we're not drenched in poetic metaphor, what does that actually look like?
Oh, absolutely. Think about how we often use language today. So much of it is purely transactional, right?
Okay.
Functional.
The message across is that.
Exactly. We're constantly sending communiques, as the text puts it. We prioritize language skills for information access and delivery, but we often lose sight of language as something inherently beautiful, resonant, deeply connected to our emotional lives.
So we focus on the what, but not the how or the feel.
Precisely. Bly argues this deficit contributes to a kind of emotional illiteracy, where we struggle to articulate complex feelings or grasp profound truths because our language has been stripped of its poetic capacity.
We're great at facts, maybe not so great at soul.
That's a good way to put it. So for you, the listener, this suggests that engaging with poetry isn't just an exercise for an English class. It's a way to re-enliven your emotional and imaginative life.
Like an antidote.
Exactly, a powerful antidote if our culture has dulled our poetic senses. It's about cultivating a deeper relationship with language itself, moving beyond its purely literal meaning to appreciate its texture, its sound, its inherent metaphorical richness.
So how would someone even start doing that?
Well, imagine what might open up within you if you allowed yourself to be drenched in words, rather than just dissecting them for meaning. Maybe simply reading aloud a powerful line of verse, feeling the rhythm and sound in your body could be a starting point.
Just speaking it out loud.
Yeah, feeling it resonate.
That idea of language being more than just information, that it holds a kind of magic, truly resonates. The foreword to the book makes this compelling distinction between reading poetry on the page, which often happens alone, right?
Yeah.
And spoken poetry.
Right, the oral tradition.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When poetry is spoken, especially when the voice truly comes from the midriff, as the text puts it, it creates this profound sense of connection.
It's from the gut almost.
Yeah. It's not just about hearing words. It's about feeling them, vibrating with them. People feel in company, in joy, in community.
A shared experience.
And through that shared vocalization, Bly observes surprising emotional depths are reached. From depths of grief all the way to flights of inspiration.
Ooh, wow.
It's as if the communal act of speaking and listening to poetry unlocks something deeper within us, something maybe inaccessible when we just read silently.
It's a fantastic point, and Bly really underscores it with that vivid story of the Irish poets. You remember that one?
Vaguely. Remind me.
Well, they gathered, trying to recall this ancient epic, the Táin. Huge body of work. No single poet knew it all. Lines were missing.
Right, okay.
So this one young poet goes to the gravestone of an old hero, Fergus, and starts chanting to his spirit.
Chanting to his spirit. Okay.
And Fergus, the spirit, responds, recites the entire epic for 3 days straight, and the young poet transcribes it all.
Whoa. That's more than just reciting.
Exactly. It's not just a quaint tale. It powerfully illustrates the communal, living, almost magical power of spoken verse. It shows how deeply intertwined language and shared human experience can be.
The magic is in the sharing, in the voice.
Precisely. The profound lesson here is that language, especially poetic language, is not merely about conveying information. It's not just language skills or information access or simply communication.
It's more.
Much more. Bly cites the Trobrianders, a culture that understands this deeply. They say the force of magic resides within man and can escape only through his voice.
Wow. Magic escaping through the voice.
And this magic isn't abstract. It actually fosters moral intelligence, which the Trobrianders call nanola. It literally allows men to speak up and out, to articulate deeper truths and insights.
Moral intelligence. Nanola.
Yeah. So much of our modern discourse, as the text notes, is just sending communiques, exchanging data points rather than truly connecting. It's a very functional, often disconnected way of using words.
That's fascinating. So for you, the listener, this raises an important question. How do you use your voice in your daily life? Are you simply relaying information, sending communiques like the text says?
Or are you tapping into that inherent magic?
Right. Imagine if, like Dylan Thomas, who apparently fell in love with words just from the sound of nursery rhymes, you paid more attention to the sonic quality of your own speech.
Feeling the sound.
Or even tried speaking poetry aloud. The anthology says Thomas's magical way with words began with listening to those incantations, the playful power of language, feeling them in his body. It suggests that by doing that, you might connect more deeply with others and with your own emotions. It allows the poem to work on the voice in its body, teaching it to dig for an animal substrate, finding strength and sensitivity.
An animal substrate. Interesting phrase.
Isn't it? This isn't just about performance. It's about a deeper, more embodied engagement with words that helps you literally speak up and out with greater moral intelligence. Even just pausing before you speak, maybe, allowing the words to form more fully.
That could make a difference, yeah. Which leads perfectly into this next point, actually. In a world where language has, as the anthology points out, kind of devolved into literal grammatical prose, that's a Robert Frost term.
Grammatical prose. Sounds dry.
It often is, or just common sense speech. How do we access that deeper, more magical power of language? Thoreau, the great American thinker, he famously warned that this kind of restricted, literal language produces brain rot.
Brain rot. Okay, Thoreau didn't mince words.
He didn't. A stagnation of thought and spirit. So how do we break through that linguistic deadening? The answer, according to Thoreau, is extravagance.
Extravagance, like being over the top.
Not necessarily just loud, but rich, full, maybe even exaggerated. He famously stated, "I am convinced that I cannot exaggerate enough even to lay the foundation of a true expression."
Wow. Exaggerate to find truth.
Exactly. The source material gives wonderful examples. Think of Rabelais' incredible exaggerations in his novels.
Gargantua and Pantagruel.
Right. Or the ancient Celtic incantation of Emergen and Cessair, which is just incredibly rich with elaborate, almost fantastical imagery. These aren't just silly. They're examples of how bombast, scurrility, far-fetched similes, and startlingly sensuous images enchant the eye, the ear.
They pull you out of the ordinary.
They do. This richness, this bombast, it charms us out of the literal. It reminds us that poetry is the art of letting the primordial word resound through the common word, as Gerhard Hauptmann puts it.
The primordial word.
Yeah. Words aren't just definitions on a page. They have roots, histories, families, genders, offspring. They're inherently metaphorical, reaching beyond their common sense definitions into mystery and myth. Vico even said, "A metaphor is a myth in brief."
A myth in brief. I love that. Every word carrying a story.
Exactly. A history, a deeper resonance that we often ignore when we're just focused on the surface meaning.
That's a fantastic insight. So for you, the listener, and how you might implement this, it means don't be afraid to be more expressive, maybe more extravagant in your own communication.
Yeah, break out of the functional box.
And this isn't just about, putting on a performance or being overly wordy. It's about connecting with those deeper layers of meaning and emotion within yourself and others. How can you challenge that deadening effect of literal language in your daily interactions?
Maybe just trying to describe something with more sensory detail.
Exactly. Perhaps describing your morning commute not just as traffic was bad, but really allowing yourself to say, the cars crept like tired beetles, their headlights glaring like angry eyes, something like that.
Painting a picture with words.
Or when you feel an emotion, push past a simple, "I'm sad," to maybe, "A gray fog has settled in my chest, heavy as an old damp blanket."
Using metaphor to capture the feeling.
These small shifts can re-enliven your own speech and thought, making your inner world more vivid and your communication more impactful. It's about letting words be charged with their full history and metaphorical power, allowing them to bring blessings, even curses, as the text notes.
Reclaiming their power.
Yeah. It's about refusing to let our words decay into disheveled neglect, and instead truly loving them, allowing them to reveal more rather than less.
Which feels like a good transition into another major theme, this idea of wildness.
Okay, let's really unpack this idea of wildness. The anthology challenges common misconceptions about what that truly is.
Yeah, it's not what most people think.
It's not, the source tells us, restricted to childishness or dominated by so-called primitive emotions or amounts to atavism, like going back to caveman days.
Right. On the contrary, Bly asserts that the wildness of nature is highly sophisticated.
Sophisticated wildness. Okay, tell me more.
It isn't about being untamed in a destructive way, but about accessing a deeper, more authentic, and often wise part of ourselves. Something profound and inherently ordered, not chaotic.
Ordered, not chaotic. That's a crucial distinction.
It is. And Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, offers a fascinating illustration that clarifies it. He remarked, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, "It's difficult to tell anybody you should get acquainted with your animal."
Because people think that sounds crazy.
Exactly, because people think it is the sort of lunatic asylum. Yet the animal is pious. It follows the path with great regularity. Only man is extravagant.
Huh. So the animal within is actually grounded, pious even.
Jung's point is that the animal within us, the wild part, isn't inherently destructive or irrational. It's often deeply instinctual, attuned, and follows its own wise rhythms. It's humanity, with our layers of civilization and denial, that can become truly chaotic or destructive by suppressing this natural wisdom.
We're the extravagant ones, not the wildness itself.
Precisely. Thoreau famously stated, "In literature, it is only the wild that attracts us because it speaks to this deeper, authentic truth." Think of powerful literary figures like King Lear,
Shedding his crown out in the storm.
Exactly. Confronting raw truth. Or the ancient dervish whirling into ecstasy. Or the Zen laugher. They embody a wildness that captivates and reveals truth, precisely because it's so profoundly real.
Not just conventional politeness.
No. William Blake reminds us that the roaring of lions, the howling of wolves, the raging of the stormy sea are portions of eternity too great for the eye of man. It suggests this grand, overwhelming wildness that we, with our dulled, civilized eye, struggle to fully perceive or accept.
Too great for the eye of man.
The core lesson here is that this wildness is about getting in touch with a deeper, more authentic self. The Sufis, for instance, they refer to it as Joseph.
Joseph, like in the Bible.
Similar archetype, but in their poetry, he's the round-faced troublemaker who can collapse an entire world with his unexpected wisdom or truth.
A troublemaker who brings truth.
Right. Not a figure of chaos, but of profound, often uncomfortable truth. This is a figure worth years of searching for, even just getting third or fourth-hand word of him, as the source puts it.
So it's about seeking that authentic, maybe disruptive inner voice.
Exactly. It's about getting in touch with impulses to drink long and deep and be thrown into the fire, experiences that blues musicians and jazz soloists, among others, understand intimately as necessary for true expression.
Pushing boundaries.
It's about knowing what is more than enough, to truly know what is enough, as Blake says, or pursuing the crooked roads without improvements, which are, in fact, the roads of genius.
Those unconventional paths.
Yeah, paths less traveled, more intuitive, often more fertile.
So this understanding of wildness has significant application for you, the listener. How much of your daily life truly allows for spontaneity, intuition, that deep-seated wildness?
That sophisticated wildness.
Right. Are there parts of yourself that you've maybe dulled or suppressed in the name of civility or conformity or just the relentless demands of modern life?
We all do it to some extent.
And this isn't an invitation to chaos or irresponsibility, as you noted. Rather, it's about trusting those deeper instincts and not being afraid of the intensity of life itself or the intensity of your own inner landscape.
How might someone practice that?
Well, perhaps it's allowing yourself a spontaneous detour on your walk home, just because a new street looks interesting, rather than always sticking to the fastest route.
Simple but deliberate.
Or choosing to hum a nonsensical tune loudly in the shower, just for the joy of it, instead of thinking about your to-do list. It's about creating small pockets where that sophisticated wildness can breathe.
Reclaiming little moments.
Consider William Carlos Williams' poem, Dance Russe, where the speaker dances naked and sings softly to himself. I am lonely, lonely. I was born to be lonely. I am best so.
Such a striking image.
It is. And it isn't self-pity, but this fierce, almost celebratory acceptance of his authentic state. A beautiful, sophisticated wildness that allows him to be the happy genius of his household.
Embracing his uniqueness.
Yeah. It's about recognizing that exuberance is beauty, as Blake also reminds us. It's the unique, untamed energy that makes something truly alive.
And if we connect this idea of embracing our authentic wildness to the bigger picture, the anthology suggests that it also means confronting grief.
Ah, grief. Often linked with wildness, isn't it?
It is. The greatest masculine art throughout history, Bly argues, has always possessed what the Romans called gravitas.
Gravitas. Weightiness.
Yes, soberness, weight, and grief. And this isn't just a fleeting emotion, it's often inexplicable, linked to deep, ancient sorrows, almost archetypal.
Ancient sorrows, like what?
Well, Bly speculates maybe it's the sorrow of the animal whose life they took back when men were primarily hunters. Or perhaps even the sadness of the forest itself, a deep ecological grief that predates our individual experience.
Wow. A grief carried in the bones, almost.
Exactly. Pablo Neruda articulates this beautifully when he says he is sad because he knows the earth, feeling the sadness in northern pines or rainforests, a universal melancholy resonating within him.
Feeling the world's sadness.
And the discovery of the oldest sorrowing male basalt statue, thousands of years old, hints that grief has been a fundamental human and often masculine emotion for millennia, often without clear external explanation, just a profound internal weight.
It's just there.
Yes. And Rolf Jacobson's poem offers this compassionate opening. Let the young rain of tears come. Let the calm hands of grief come. It's not all as evil as you think, suggesting that allowing this process isn't destructive, but healing.
So the lesson isn't to avoid it.
No, quite the opposite. The lesson here is crucial. This gravitas is not self-pity. It's a deep, expanded acknowledgement of loss and suffering, both personal and universal. It's about allowing our hurt to expand downward into true compassion for ourselves and for the world.
Expanding downward into compassion.
Yeah. The pain can be profound without any explanation, as Cesar Vallejo expresses in I Am Going to Speak of Hope, where his pain is so deep it's neither parent nor son, lacking a clear cause. This means sitting with suffering, allowing it to move through us rather than trying to bypass or deny it.
That uncomfortable but necessary work.
It is the necessary work of expanding our emotional capacity.
That's a powerful and often overlooked aspect of emotional depth. So, for you, the listener, how do you acknowledge and process sadness in your own life? Is there a fear, maybe, of embracing these deeper, sometimes uncomfortable emotions?
It's common fear.
The text suggests that denying this gravitas leads to flattened emotions, preventing us from experiencing the full spectrum of human feeling and empathy, learning to sit with that melancholy inside families, as Neruda describes.
Or the sorrow of the huge cliffs.
Yeah, feeling that ancient weight. It can be a pathway to deeper understanding and connection. It's not about wallowing, but about allowing the young rain of tears and the calm hands of grief to come, understanding that it's not all as evil as you think.
Trusting the process.
This can lead to that profound realization, as Theodore Roethke writes in The Waking, that what falls away is always and is near. Loss isn't just an end, a void, but something that remains present, holding its own significance, maybe even a strange beauty.
It becomes part of us.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that these experiences, no matter how painful, become part of the tapestry of who you are, making you more empathetic and whole. It's the weight that gives life depth.
And that depth affects our relationships, doesn't it? Which brings us to fathers.
Right. So what does this all mean for our relationships, particularly with fathers? The anthology dives into what it calls the House of Fathers and Titans.
Intriguing title.
It is. And it immediately recognizes that our connection to father figures is often a realm of questions, mysteries. From the very moment of conception, the text says, walls stand between father and the child to be.
Walls.
Yeah. The father, whether physically present or absent, inevitably brings distance to the child's world and sadness. And this isn't about assigning blame, right?
No, it's observing something fundamental, archetypal.
About human development and our primal search for identity and grounding.
It's a profound exploration, and Bly links it to the pervasive presence of the absent father of our culture.
Not just individual dads.
No, not just individual fathers, but a deeper cultural vacuum, almost a dead god who offered a focus for spiritual things. Without that anchoring, the culture, and by extension, individuals, often turn to dreams and oracles rather than to prayer, code, tradition, and ritual.
Seeking answers in less grounded ways.
Exactly. Seeking answers in more amorphous ways. And this idea gets a vivid, even chilling illustration through Hesiod's ancient Greek text, Theogony. Remember Kronos?
Saturn, right, swallowing his children.
Exactly. Kronos swallowed his children to prevent them from overthrowing him. And similarly, David Ray's modern poem, Saturn, depicts a father eating his children as a metaphor.
Metaphor for what?
For a life where the children's very existence slowly disappears into the father's, their individuality consumed by his needs, his absence, or his own unresolved issues.
Wow, that's a heavy image.
It is. These powerful images highlight the potential for fathers through their distance or failings to symbolically consume or diminish their children's independent lives and spirits. It's a warning, not just an observation.
So the lesson isn't blame.
No, blame is unproductive. Instead, it's to understand how this distance and mystery fundamentally impacts us and how it sets up a lifelong quest. The journey to fully enter life involves, for a child, being held by the father, symbolically or literally, to feel separate and distinct from the mother, to feel truly launched into the world.
Launched by the father.
Seeking this touch and blessing from the father is crucial, and it's a process of unwinding cloth and unlocking cultural strangulation, as Haki Madhuti puts it in his poem, Men and Birth.
Unlocking cultural strangulation.
It's the work of the father to guide the child toward life, forward into their own story, not to hold them back. And when that guidance is absent, well, we often spend our lives seeking it in other ways.
That concept of unwinding cloth and unlocking cultural strangulation from the father figure is incredibly resonant. So for you, the listener, the application here is deeply personal. Consider your own relationship with your father figure.
Or the idea of fatherhood itself.
Right. Or with the broader archetypal idea of fatherhood. How has this shaped your sense of self and your journey into the world? The anthology offers that tender story.
The splinter.
Yeah, the father pulling a metal splinter from his son's palm in Lai Young Lee's poem, The Gift. This isn't just about a physical act. It illustrates the tenderness and the flames of discipline a father can impart.
Both tenderness and discipline.
Through that seemingly small, painful act, the father teaches the son to face pain, to trust, and ultimately to grow. This deep dive encourages you to acknowledge the legacy of fatherhood, both its challenging aspects and its supportive ones, and to move towards deeper self-awareness.
Seeing the whole picture.
It's about recognizing those vital, austere, and lonely offices of love, as Robert Hayden puts it in Those Winter Sundays, the quiet sacrifices and difficult lessons that, though not always easy, are essential for our becoming. This acknowledgement can be a powerful step towards healing and integration.
Understanding where you came from to better understand where you were going. And what's fascinating here is how the anthology then shifts from that often difficult house of fathers to something called the cultivated heart.
The cultivated heart sounds gentler.
It is, in a way. It's described as a place of tenderness that receives intensification toward tenderness. This concept, which really started to emerge in Europe around the 12th century, wasn't about weakness, though.
No. What was it about?
It involved courtesy, but not just superficial politeness, a deep commitment to honoring elders, supporting other men, acknowledging their fragility, their need for solidarity, and, critically, doing honor to women, even in difficult situations. It represented a radical departure from older, more aggressive male norms, moving away from a purely physical, conquest-driven interaction.
A shift in how men related, especially to women.
Definitely. The illustrative details really highlight this. The source contrasts the older male act, a man on horseback who would simply make love to her and that's that, then ride on like in older literature. But with the new vows of courtesy, a man might talk, make promises, and crucially, listen for her reply. Even obey her if she told him not to bother getting off his horse, just to ride on.
Whoa, obey her. That's a big shift.
Huge. It wasn't just changed behavior, it showed a fundamental shift toward a tender heart, one capable of listening, respecting, entering into a deeper relational space. This new love was called amour.
Amour.
And it was seen as a transparency to the great feminine, a kind of spiritual opening that was, in some ways, revolutionary, even considered a threat by the church at the time because it shifted focus from purely divine love to profound human connection.
Interesting. And where did this idea come from?
Well, Bly notes it was significantly inspired by Islamic civilization, which encouraged and achieved marvelous cultivation of the lover's heart. It's like a closed garden, a hortus inclusus.
A closed garden. Seems contradictory.
Paradoxically, yeah. Needing walls to grow to protect the delicate vines of ancestral training and inner growth happening inside.
That's a beautiful metaphor, the closed garden of the heart needing protection to flourish. So for you, the listener, how do you approach tenderness and courtesy in your own life and relationships?
Do you allow yourself to be influenced?
Right. By beauty in a savvy woman, as the text says, or other guiding forces that prompt inner growth and a more open heart. This cultivation also involves what the anthology calls intensity of longing.
Intensity of longing.
As Kabir describes in To Be a Slave of Intensity, it's the intensity, the longing for the guest that does all the work. This isn't about seeking immediate gratification.
Well, it's deeper, a spiritual longing.
That keeps the soul in growing orbits, as Real beautifully puts it in I Live My Life. Constantly expanding and searching rather than contracting into comfort or complacency.
Reaching.
And remarkably, Antonio Machado's poem, Last Night, offers this incredible insight into cultivation. He dreams of a beehive in his heart.
A beehive.
Yeah, where the golden bees were making white combs and sweet honey from my old failures.
Yeah, making honey from failures, wow.
Isn't that amazing? Your past disappointments, your missteps, the things that sting, can actually become sources of new richness, wisdom, and understanding if you cultivate a heart open enough to transform them.
So even bitter experiences can become sweet.
It seems so. This means that even what seems like loss or bitterness can be converted into something deeply nourishing, a testament to the resilient and transformative power of a cultivated heart. It's about taking the fragments of your life, the rag and bone, and creating something profoundly sweet and meaningful from them.
Which requires facing things, not denying them.
Exactly. Which brings us here, where it gets really interesting and maybe a bit uncomfortable.
The denial part.
Yeah. The anthology makes this bold, almost provocative claim. It suggests that the United States has achieved the first consistent culture of denial in the modern world.
That's a huge statement.
It is. Denial in this context is presented as an extension into all levels of society, of the naive person's inability to face the harsh facts of life. This isn't just about individual shortcomings, it permeates the fabric of our society, almost like a collective agreement to look away.
And what kind of harsh facts are we talking about?
The source gives stark examples. It includes not seeing what the deficit and rapid use of oil will do to our grandchildren,
Long-term consequences.
or turning a blind eye to parental cruelty, realities that, if faced, would demand difficult action and emotional discomfort.
Things we'd rather not see.
Exactly. It's a pervasive coolness, as Bly describes it. The text further illustrates this by noting how schools teach denial by not teaching, meaning they avoid difficult or uncomfortable truths in the curriculum.
Omission as denial.
Language itself becomes impoverished, simplified to avoid complexity. And think about television anchors, not to become excited about anything. That fosters a widespread coolness that spreads.
Keep calm and carry on, even when things are serious.
Right. This passionate dedication to not knowing means, for instance, that our wars are always noble or our bombing surgical, a sanitized, often inaccurate narrative that prevents true moral reckoning.
Avoiding the ugly truth.
Mark Twain's powerful piece, The War Prayer, is cited as a crucial work of art that punches a hole in denial.
How so?
By starkly revealing the hidden, brutal truths of war, unmasking the hypocrisy of praying for victory without acknowledging the horrific suffering it inflicts on the other side.
Holding up a mirror.
Exactly. The core lesson here is that remaining in the first layer of niceness and surface courtesies, while may be necessary for social survival, ultimately prevents true emotional and societal growth. It keeps us stuck in a superficial reality.
So politeness can be a form of denial.
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
The only way out of this comfortable but ultimately stagnant denial, the anthology argues, is to enter the turmoil of the second layer, the territory of anger, hatred, outrage.
Whoa, enter the turmoil. That sounds dangerous.
It sounds uncomfortable, for sure. Facing this bitter truth, what the Japanese martial arts tradition calls eating bitter or even eating a shadow, is essential for personal and societal healing. It's the only way to process and move beyond these unacknowledged truths.
You have to taste the bitterness to get past it.
And art and literature are presented as critical tools in this process. They're the best hope in making headway against denial. They offer ways to confront these truths safely, through story and imagery, and open our eyes.
That's a challenging but deeply important idea. That true growth sometimes requires embracing discomfort, even anger or outrage.
It is. So for you, the listener, the application here is deeply personal. Where in your own life might you be avoiding the bitter truth? What uncomfortable realities are you perhaps not seeing, either within yourself, in your relationships, or in the world around you?
It's a tough question to ask oneself.
It is. And this isn't about becoming consumed by negativity or wallowing in despair. Instead, it's about allowing yourself to feel the full, sometimes uncomfortable range of emotions, including anger and grief, as a necessary step towards deeper understanding and genuine transformation.
So feeling the anger is better than suppressing it.
The text warns that if we avoid entering this territory, we risk attracting shadowy figures who will one day explode into their life, meaning unresolved issues or external problems might manifest unexpectedly and disruptively.
The things we ignore come back to bite us.
Seems that way. Emily Dickinson offers this brilliant insight into anger. 'Cause starving makes it fat.
Starving makes it fat, paradoxical.
If you deny it, suppress it, refuse to acknowledge it, it gains power, growing larger and more destructive in the shadows. But if you acknowledge it, allow yourself to feel it, process it, its destructive power diminishes. Denial feeds it.
So acknowledging it shrinks it.
It seems so. It's about getting used to the flavor of bitter, getting used to having that flavor of bitter truth in the mouth, accepting it as a necessary part of a full, authentic life.
Which maybe ultimately allows us to love the world more fully.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the final and perhaps most profound lesson from the Rag and Bone Shop of the Heart is simply loving the world anyway.
Loving the world anyway, despite the bitterness.
Despite everything. This challenges our modern urban tendency to view the world primarily as a disturbance, a place of problems, or to focus so narrowly on our own issues that everything becomes a comment on my life, as David Ignatow's poem suggests.
Getting stuck in our own heads, our own problems.
Yeah, caught in getting and spending, as Wordsworth described it, overly consumed with material stuff, and often missing the beauty that is inherently ours in nature and the everyday.
The beauty that's just there.
The anthology invites us to move beyond this narrow, self-enclosed perspective and recognize that despite ugliness and injustice, the world remains lovable anyway.
Anyway, that word feels important.
It's crucial. It means any which way, any way at all, suggesting there are myriad paths out of self-enclosure and towards a genuine, profound love of the world.
How do we find those paths?
Well, the source gives powerful examples, finding solace in memory images, like an empty winter beach holding its own quiet beauty, or acknowledging something amazing in the mundane.
Like what?
Francis Ponge praises the delights of the door, finding joy in philosophical depths in just holding a door, observing its textures. Pablo Neruda wrote an ode to my socks.
Oh, to socks, seriously.
Finding deep wonder in the ordinary comfort. Charles Simic praises breasts, finding philosophical depths in the physical. And Gerard Manley Hopkins, in Pied Beauty, celebrates dappled things.
Dappled things.
The unique, imperfect, varied beauty in nature. Skies of couple color as a brinded cow, rose moles upon trout that swim. It's an active, appreciative gaze towards the existing world.
Seeing the extraordinary in the ordinary.
And Carl Sandburg's wilderness poem, with its list of internal animals. A wolf in me, a fox in me, a hog in me, a fish in me, a baboon in me, and then a man-child heart, a woman-child heart, a pal of the world. It expresses this holistic acceptance of inner and outer wildness, praising all parts of existence, messy and beautiful alike.
Accepting the whole package.
The core lesson here is that praise is an old-fashioned virtue.
We don't talk much about praise anymore.
We don't. But it delights in the world and brings delight to it. It involves not overlooking or neglecting even the small things and recognizing the magnificence in the everyday.
Paying attention.
Remembering that nature is never spent. As Hopkins reminds us, there's always more beauty and energy, and that exuberance is beauty, according to Blake. The world is always more than anything you do in it, to it, with it.
Bigger than our individual dramas.
Yeah, even in tragedy, like the fall of Icarus in Auden's poem Musée des Beaux-Arts, where Icarus falls unnoticed while the world sails calmly on.
Life goes on.
It reminds us of the world's supreme indifference, in a way which sets limits to the heroic urge. This indifference isn't a dismissal. It's a humbling force that puts human actions into humbler proportion, inviting us to appreciate the world as it is, not just as a stage for our dramas.
That's a really grounding perspective.
So for you, the listener, how do you practice praise in your daily life? Can you find beauty and wonder in the dappled things, the ordinary objects, or the complex, sometimes harsh realities around you?
That's a conscious choice, isn't it?
It is. And this isn't about forced optimism or superficial cheerfulness. It's about a deep, grounded acceptance and appreciation for the full spectrum of existence. Wendell Berry's idea of ripening suggests that the sweetness of ripening comes from embracing all of life.
Including the bitter parts we just talked about.
Exactly, embracing the bitter aspects too. This leads to a profound state where, as Yeats writes in a dialogue of self and soul, everything we look upon is blessed.
Seeing the blessing in everything.
To be alive to hear this song of the world is a victory, an old West African song reminds us. It's about cultivating a grateful gaze that sees the richness in everything, knowing that the world is always more than our limited problem-focused perspective of it.
Small acts of praise.
Perhaps it's a moment of quiet gratitude for a simple cup of coffee, or a pause to truly notice the intricate pattern of a leaf. These small acts build towards a profound love of life itself.
Powerful way to live.
It really is. So if you're journeyed through the rag and bone shop of the heart, exploring how poetry illuminates our inner wildness, the intricate dance of fatherhood, the fundamental power of our voice,
The need to face denial.
the necessity of facing denial, and the profound transformative act of loving the world, warts and all, we've seen how engaging with words can re-enliven our imagination, how facing grief allows for deeper compassion.
And how a cultivated heart embraces both tenderness and that fierce, expansive longing.
Yeah, it's a collection that truly gives us tools for living, doesn't it?
It really does. This deep dive into Robert Bly's anthology reminds us that true understanding comes not just from acquiring information, data points,
Right.
but from engaging with the fundamental, timeless questions of human existence. And these questions are often found in the most unexpected places, in the sound of a word, in a father's touch, in the wildness within us, or in the very fabric of our everyday surroundings.
It's hidden in plain sight.
Often, it's about letting the words resonate, allowing them to shape our emotions, and applying their timeless wisdom to our modern lives. So the question for you, listening, is, What specific nugget or lesson from today's deep dive will you carry with you as you navigate your own unique journey?
What stood out?
Exactly. How will you begin to cultivate your own rag and bone shop of the heart, transforming life's fragments, the beautiful, the broken, the mundane, into profound insights and enduring wisdom that makes your life richer, deeper, and more fully lived?